Welcome to the Daily Insider for Monday, March 8th, 2021. Kevin Rogers with you. Hope you had a great weekend as we head into championship week in college basketball. Already a couple of conference championships have been decided, but more tonight, and we'll get to that in just a moment. And then the big boys will begin starting Tuesday. You have the ACC tournament in Greensboro, North Carolina, and then we'll have the Big East, the SEC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, all of them will be, in the Big 10, they'll all be coming up this week. So a lot of basketball during the day and night, which is very exciting, and the NBA will return on Wednesday after the All-Star break. But let's begin with college basketball and what transpired on Sunday inside of college hoops, and the big upset before we look at today. The big upset, of course, Michigan State beating Michigan in East Lansing. These teams played back-to-back games. Michigan won the first game, but the second game goes to the Spartans, 70-64. They went outright as 8-point underdogs. And for the Wolverines, or for the Spartans rather, you look at what they've done recently, beating Illinois, beating Michigan, beating Ohio State. Like, this was a really big stretch for Tom Izzo's team trying to still sneak into the tournament. And for Michigan, they're all set. They're fine. And, for them to lose this game to the Spartans, rivalry game you lose, no big deal. And, yeah, they've lost 2 of 3, but the Wolverines likely will be a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament coming up. Selection Sunday is actually next week, so we're less than a week away from that, so looking forward to that. Elsewhere in the Big Ten, Iowa beats Wisconsin 77-73, kind of a back-and-forth game because Wisconsin took the lead in that one, but Iowa ends up winning it. They don't cover, though, as 7.5-point favorites, and the Hawkeyes closed the season strong after they were blown out at Michigan. And when you look at what Iowa did, 7 of 8, they win down the stretch, winning at Ohio State, beating Wisconsin at home, also beating Wisconsin in Madison, blowing out Michigan State. A very good ending for the Iowa Hawkeyes to close out the season, a team that keep an eye on for the NCAA tournament. Meanwhile, in the SEC, Tennessee beats Florida. And Tennessee was down 5 at the half to the Gators, and that was a revenge spot for the Volunteers because Florida blew them out in Gainesville when they played back in mid-January, 75-49. So a good bounce back there for the Volunteers. And again, very up-and-down finish for Rick Barnes' team, losing to Auburn on the road, but they get that win against Florida. They also had a bad home loss to Kentucky. Tennessee will be in, but they did not look very strong. And for Florida, they end the season with back-to-back losses. They lost in the final seconds to Missouri and then lose to Tennessee. So Florida had a nice little winning streak here, even though they beat Georgia, Auburn, Kentucky, 3 teams that aren't going to the tournament, but losing to 2 teams that will be going to the tournament, and also losing to South Carolina. So really not the best finish necessarily as far as beating good teams. The last good win came against West Virginia in the SEC Big 12 Challenge back in late January. But besides that, not a lot of wins that get you excited if you're the Florida Gators. Houston ended up beating Memphis on a last-second three-pointer, but the Cougars don't cover as 10-point favorites. And Memphis actually closed the season on a nice ATS run. But Houston falls short of winning the American because Wichita State ended up winning it on Saturday when they knocked off USF. So, Houston's still going to be a pretty high seed in the NCAA tournament. Elsewhere in the American, Cincinnati pulled away from East Carolina, 82-69. East Carolina actually handed Houston its first loss of the season, surprisingly. But Cincinnati, who had a bit of a tough run here at the end, losing at home to Memphis in the Vandy, beating East Carolina. And we'll see if Cincinnati can maybe make a run in the American tournament. Likely not, but you never know. Northwestern was up comfortably over Nebraska, but they only ended up winning by 1 over the Huskers, 79-78. This after Northwestern beat Maryland a few nights ago as a home dog, which was their their second consecutive win. So they had back-to-back wins as a dog, then they lose to Nebraska. Now they'll play Minnesota in the Big Ten tournament. And for Northwestern, I mean, you see them, they hadn't been favored since the game against Pitt in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, and playing, two other teams, Pine Bluff and Chicago State, who stopped their season before 2021 hit. So Northwestern, you don't get them normally as a favorite, and here they don't cover as a favorite, and Nebraska ends up getting the cover in that one. Baylor jumped out to a big lead over Texas Tech. Texas Tech cut it to 2 at the half, but then you see 54 points scored in the second half of the Bears, and Baylor really needed this one because they had gone 3 of 4 games without an ATS cover. They got the fortunate ATS cover at West Virginia in overtime, winning by 5, laying 4.5, but also losing to Kansas. Didn't cover against Oklahoma State, but they beat Texas Tech here. So they go 2-0 against Texas Tech this year. And for the Red Raiders, again, they're still a tournament team, but they had their 3-game winning streak snapped. And in the stretch, only good team they beat was Texas. And when you look back at what Texas Tech did late, look, Iowa State didn't win a game in the Big 12. TCU, mediocre team. Losing on the road to Oklahoma State and Kansas, losing at West Virginia. Beating Kansas State is not a big deal. They held off Oklahoma. They won at Louisiana State. In that game in Baton Rouge, they had a 12-0 run to end the game, so they should have lost that one. Texas Tech not really looking great necessarily. I mean, I guess the last good road win was at Texas here in January. But again, Chris Beard, he's gone to the national championship, so I don't want to count these guys out, but just making the point that Texas Tech, there's not a lot of impressive wins there down the stretch. There's not. And look, losing to Baylor, there's nothing to apologize about. Baylor's going to be a number 1 seed, but teams like Texas Tech and Florida did not really get anybody excited down the stretch with their wins. And then you go back to Saturday, Seton Hall has totally fallen off the wagon. They were up 18-0 at St. John's. They lose that game by double digits. That was a team you thought was a top 3 team in the Big East. Doesn't look like it now. Speaking of Texas, they pull away from TCU 76-64. So Shaka Smart and the Longhorns, that's 3 straight road wins. Winning at Oklahoma is a quality win. And before that, they beat Kansas in overtime. They came back from a double-digit deficit there. That's the problem with the Big 12 is TCU, Kansas State, Iowa State, all bottom-tier teams. And I feel like all these teams drew them a lot late. Now, obviously, at the top, Baylor, West Virginia, Kansas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma had a bad finish to the season. So we're still trying to figure out the Big 12 and see how legit it is as far as, because Kansas had a bad stretch. They played well in the final few games. We know what Baylor is. We know West Virginia is pretty good. Texas had ups and downs. And again, the way it's going to work out probably is Texas will probably go far in the tournament. Penn State, how about this? They rally past Maryland. I mean, Maryland, that's another one. Maryland, Seton Hall, these teams, you just can't trust right now. And Maryland ends up, well, first we'll look at Penn State, and they end the season winning 3 of 4. Then they get Nebraska, very winnable game, and they split with Nebraska this year. But Maryland, look at what they did here. 5 straight wins. They lose to Northwestern. They lose to Penn State. But they're beating Illinois on the road, Wisconsin on the road. They had some good victories this year, but yet they had some terrible losses. So I don't know how much you trust Maryland moving forward. Oregon gets revenge on Oregon State in the Civil War game for basketball because Oregon State went into Eugene and beat the Ducks 75-64 back in late January as 9.5-point dogs. So the Beavers won that one. The Ducks going to Corvallis. They win 80-67. Great finish for Dana Altman's team. 5 straight wins. They go 4-1 ATS in the last 5. And really the Stanford game, Oregon opened as a 1 or 2 point favorite, and they closed at 4 because De Silva, one of the top players for Stanford, he was out that game. So that line jumped, and then Stanford lost by 3. So it kind of depends on where you got the number. So you could argue almost 5-0 ATS for Oregon, even though the closing number was 4. But even for the Ducks, beating Arizona and UCLA at home, getting the revenge win against Oregon State, they had a clunker against USC, but beating Colorado at home, winning at Arizona, really good finish for Oregon in the final couple games. And even for Oregon State, look, this is a team that's not going to the tournament, but look at what they did. Winning 3 games on the road, came back against Cal, beat Stanford and Utah as a dog. You lost to your rival, beat Utah here, beat the Washington schools, I know aren't that great, but also they beat USC, won at Oregon, beat Arizona State at home. Oregon State's not going to the tournament, but they had a nice season considering they were picked to finish towards the bottom of the Pac-12. They were not considered to do much this season. Loyola Chicago wins the Missouri Valley. They beat Drake 75-65. So now you wonder if Drake gets in. A lot of people think they aren't getting in. Sun Belt tonight, Appalachian State and Georgia State. Maybe we could move forward to today. All right, let's start from the top. Colonial. Hofstra and Elon, they tip things off at 6 o'clock in the semifinals. Hofstra, who beat Delaware, and they've been off for a little bit since that. Look at that, mid-February, last time they played, and then they just beat Delaware. Hofstra did not face Elon this season. You see the ups and downs here down the stretch after a nice little winning streak there for the Pride. For Elon, do they make a run? They beat Towson. They beat James Madison, the number 1 seed. So Elon playing very well. They haven't lost a game since mid-February. So I'll give, Elon could be maybe a look. We'll see. Drexel and Northeastern is the late game in the Colonial. Drexel's laying 1. Drexel off this victory over Charleston. And now they get Northeastern, and they had a couple games wiped out against Northeastern. That's the problem, is you don't have any regular season information because these games inside of some of these conferences, you had so many games lost that these teams haven't even played each other yet. And for Northeastern, they beat William and Mary convincingly. Remember, Northeastern had this game against UNC just scheduled out of nowhere, lost by 20. Split a couple of games with Towson, had a nice run here in January. I mean, Northeastern's always a decent squad out of the Colonial. In the Horizon League, they've been off for a week. Remember they played those crazy games last week? They've been off since then. So you kind of wonder how it's going to work out tonight. But Cleveland State, who knocked out Fort Wayne, the Mastodons, formerly IPFW, they're just called Fort Wayne now. They win that game in triple overtime, 108-104. Cleveland State finished second in the Horizon behind Wright State. Wright State got knocked out last week. They got knocked out by Wisconsin-Milwaukee. We're supposed to call Milwaukee. I mean, it's Wisconsin-Milwaukee, but I think they go by Milwaukee now. Milwaukee beat Wright State 94-92. They were getting 13 points last week. They were down 18 at the half, and they came back and won that game. Now they're getting 3.5. Wright State won the conference. Wright State and Cleveland State finished with the same conference record on the Horizon, but yet they're getting 13 to Wright State, getting 3.5 against Cleveland State. And Cleveland State was a team that was undervalued a lot during the season. And you see right here, Wright State lost by 11 to Cleveland State back on January 22nd. They beat Cleveland State in overtime the next day, 81-80. So you had a dramatically different game from a scoring standpoint, and also Milwaukee got the outright win. Then they kind of struggled here in Milwaukee. See, they lost twice to Wright State and then knocked them out in the conference tournament. But Cleveland State's a team that did really well against the spread this season. And they rarely won games and didn't cover. But again, they had a lot of short numbers early. And even here, you see the class difference, you want to call it, with them and Wright State. They're getting 9.5, 8.5 against Wright State, and they got blown out in the second game. And Cleveland State, if you remember or not, they played Ohio back in early December, and Ohio went on like a 40-0 run in that game. in the middle of the game. 101-46 was the final. Ohio beat them. So, but Cleveland State has found a way to get one win from the Horizon Championship. So the winner of Cleveland State and Milwaukee gets the Norse of Northern Kentucky or Oakland. And Northern Kentucky beat... Northern Kentucky knocked off Detroit with a buzzer-beating victory to advance to this round of the Horizon, of the semifinals. And you see they played pretty well down the stretch. They slipped up against Wisconsin Green Bay and lost to Wright State, who's the best team in the conference, even though they're out right now. Oakland had this horrible start to the season in non-conference. And they get blown out by Xavier. They get blown out by Toledo. They lose by 14 to Bradley. They hung with Michigan in overtime. That game went to OT and they lost by 10. But Purdue, Oklahoma State, Michigan State, they played good teams. And then things turned around once they got into Horizon League play. And Greg Kampe always goes over. I mean, look at all these numbers, giving up 80 or more, scoring 80 or more. But now they're right here. I mean, almost at the goal line of the Horizon Championship. So you get Northern Kentucky, Oakland, the late game there. The Summit League, Oral Roberts, and South Dakota State tonight. And South Dakota State split a pair of games with Oral Roberts back in mid-February, both high-scoring games. I mean, look at the numbers they put up. Coming off a win against Omaha by 13, didn't cover. And for the Golden Eagles of Oral Roberts, coming off a few wins here, beating North Dakota in the last round by 11. But again, just crazy high-scoring games with these Summit League teams. North Dakota State and South Dakota is the late game tonight in the semifinals in that one. And they just played each other about a week ago. They split a pair of games, these two teams. So that's what you got in that conference. The Metro Championship tonight, Canisius and Ryder. And Canisius, the MAC had a lot of games postponed, so it's so tough to really have strong opinions about these teams because, it felt like a lot of the conference lost their games. So that's what you got in the MAC tonight. The Sun Belt title game, Georgia State and App State, and Georgia State laying 7 in that one. Georgia State coming off victories over Arkansas State, which they hung on, and they beat Louisiana Lafayette to now advance to this game. They just beat App State here, 85-71, back in late February, and they lost a pair of games to App State on the road. So it's going to be a tough sled in there. So they're laying 7 against a team they've already lost to twice this year. And for App State, held off Texas State, who's one of the top teams in the Sun Belt, beat Coastal Carolina. Those are two quality teams in that conference that they beat. And now they face Georgia State for the 4th time this season. And they've already lost. So App State's 2-1 against them, and they're getting 7. Mercer and UNC Greensboro in the SoCon, in the Southern. And UNC Greensboro is the best team in that conference. And you see what they did here, beating the Citadel by 8, beating East Tennessee State by 12. Now they draw Mercer, who they've beaten twice already. They beat them by 3 here in Macon and beat them by 13 at home. So now you get the double, or I guess the triple revenge. Double revenge, I guess would be the right term. Double revenge for Mercer. And Mercer, if you remember, they beat Georgia Tech on the road way back in non-conference play. Pretty important to remember. But they beat Wofford, who was the second best team in the SoCon, in the middle game. So 4 straight games that Mercer's playing now. 4 straight days. Samford, Wofford, and VMI. And they were laying points to VMI in the last game. Now you get UNC Greensboro. Look, we've seen what we saw. We just saw Belmont lose to Morehead State. So we've seen these teams get knocked off inside the top teams get knocked off in some of these conferences. So it's not crazy to think that Mercer could win that game against UNC Greensboro. And then you have Gonzaga and St. Mary's tonight inside the WCC. And we know what Gonzaga can do. They haven't covered the last few games. I mean, they're laying a ton of points here. Laying 20.5 last time to St. Mary's, won by 22, laying 16, and they won by 14. We know how dominant Gonzaga is. And then looking ahead to midnight, technically Tuesday, Pepperdine and BYU, the second game inside the WCC. And BYU right now playing their first game of the WCC. Because remember, a lot of these teams had multiple buys. Well, I should say a lot. Gonzaga and BYU had multiple buys. So now they get Pepperdine, and they haven't played in, 10 days or so? And they split a pair of games with Pepperdine. Let's see, the Waves coming off a win over Santa Clara. So they just forced a lot of these teams in the WCC to play a bunch of games before, if you were towards the bottom. And then if you're Gonzaga, you just wait it out. So I was wrong. I want to apologize for something. I made a mistake. I misspoke. That was not earlier about Canisius. That's the Metro is just starting their tournament. I misspoke about that with the championship. So my bad on that one. But you see tomorrow, we're not going to break these games down now. We'll wait till tomorrow. ACC starts, Miami and Pitt, BC and Duke. You don't see Duke playing the first day normally in the ACC tournament. Wake and Notre Dame. Big West a few games. Conference USA gets started. And the Southland as well. McNeese and Southeast Louisiana, Incarnate Word, and Houston Baptist. Games to keep an eye on. And, of course, we'll have more games because tonight you'll have the Colonial Championship, the Horizon Championship, the Summit Championship. All those games will be coming up tomorrow. So you have all these matchups set late tonight and going into tomorrow. So we got all of that. Now, all that being said, the NBA, in case you missed it last night, I don't know if you saw it or not, the All-Star game won by Team LeBron as they beat Team Durant 170-150. And what's amazing with this is the total was 319.5, finished at 320. I mean, that one you can't make up. But how about this? 101 points scored in the second quarter between the two teams. We know it's the All-Star game. They don't play any defense. But the fourth quarter, 49. So you got the 101 in the second. You only get 49, but it barely goes over. And Team LeBron was laying 4.5. So they get the comfortable win. Giannis Antetokounmpo is the MVP. Didn't miss a shot from the field. Look, I've said this for a long time. I probably haven't said it on here, but I think that we should just have a week off and no All-Star game. I think people have lost interest in the All-Star game. The players have lost interest. I mean, you heard what LeBron was saying before, not like yesterday, but when the whole idea was coming out with the All-Star game with COVID and all that, and then Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid don't play in the game because the positive test with the barber, close contact, all this other stuff, that we've seen super teams. We've seen all these other things in the NBA. You have League Pass, you have NBA TV, you have all these games on TV. We've seen these guys play alongside one another. And I believe it's the first time LeBron and Steph Curry were playing on the same team. So you had that one. But nobody's interested in the dunk contest anymore because you don't have big names in there. 3-point contest. Steph won last night, but I don't think a lot of people are crazy about it. Just give us a week off. Give everyone a week off. Let them relax and then start again. That's the way I think it needs to be moving forward. It's not going to be that way. I'm not the commissioner. I'm not Adam Silver. But it just needs to go away because the All-Star game is just not what it used to be in any sport, honestly. I think it's all the same in every sport, that you see these guys play all the time. You see everybody on TV all the time. It used to be cool, like, oh, I don't get to see this guy play this guy or this guy ever play. You see everybody all the time, and you have highlights on social media. You could find these things. So I just don't think it's worth anybody's time anymore. Now, we still have a few days off. NBA returns Wednesday. Washington and Memphis, San Antonio, Dallas. Those are the first two games out of the break. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that these games are makeup games because you had Memphis had some games lost due to COVID stuff. So did San Antonio. Well, San Antonio and Dallas also had weather issues in Texas a few weeks ago. So they were supposed to begin Thursday, and now they're starting Wednesday, trying to squeeze in some of these games. And then Thursday, you got a ton of games. When was that? 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 games coming up on Thursday. Boston, Brooklyn, big game inside the Atlantic Division. Blake Griffin is now a Brooklyn Net, so we'll see what kind of impact he makes with the Nets moving forward. Also, Golden State and the Clippers. That's a big game. And Steph Curry sat out the final game before the All-Star break against Phoenix, and they got blown out, but you saw what he did last night. He's fine. Give him some rest. And they'll probably get Kelly Oubre back as well, you would think. Phoenix and Portland. That's a big revenge spot for Portland after getting blown out by Phoenix. So you got that coming up on Thursday. Wow, this game. Houston, Sacramento. That's definitely going to be a push because both those teams can't cover a number to save themselves. So that's the look at the NBA moving forward. So we have a few days off before we get back to the association. NHL, we'll take a look at that for a moment. And Ottawa, another big win yesterday over Calgary in overtime, or in the shootout rather, 4-3. And when you look at what Ottawa has done of late, I mean, they lost a few in a row here, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wins, plus 155, plus 135, 135, 180, 190, 250, 190, 260. Still got some value with Ottawa. People are sleeping on them, and they're winning games. Nashville beats Dallas. Dallas, if you want to make money in hockey, just fade the Stars. They beat Columbus here, lost here, 1-3, 1-4, 1-5, 2-5, 2-6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They've lost 10 of their past 12. They were favored in 3 and 5 of them. I mean, why should you think Dallas is going to play any better right now? They're not. They're not playing well. Tampa Bay comes back and beats Chicago. They cover the puck line down 3-0. Lightning are a very good team. Islanders end up winning this game against the Sabres. Islanders have won 5 straight. Carolina holds off Florida 4-2. Panthers run a back-to-back after playing at Nashville. Good pull here by the Devils, winning 1-0, getting plus 240 against the Bruins. So nice job by New Jersey. Washington wins at Philly. Penguins really needed this win, beating the Rangers 5-1. Now let's look at tonight's NHL action. And only 6 games tonight. A lot of games out west. But Vegas and Minnesota, they hook up. They just played, too, in Las Vegas. And the Golden Knights won each of those games. Look what the Golden Knights offense has done. 4-5-5-5. So pretty good job there. Minnesota was on fire, but they've really slowed down. Mentioned Ottawa and Edmonton. Why not look at Ottawa? I mean, at this point, the way they're playing, keep taking shots with them at plus 190. Montreal goes to Vancouver, and that's one of the late-night games tonight. Matt Blunt's got a really nice write-up on that game, and Vancouver coming off a pair of home wins against Toronto. That's pretty impressive after they had a nice losing streak here. And the last time they played Montreal, they lost a pair of games. They've struggled against Montreal this year. They've lost 4 or 5 to the Canadiens. Arizona and Colorado from Ball Center in Denver. And Colorado coming off this loss as a 2-10 favorite to Anaheim. But they've done a pretty good job of bouncing back from losses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5-1, 6-1, 7-1. So Colorado 7-1 off a loss this year. Heavy number they're laying to Arizona, but still. LA and Anaheim, St. Louis, San Jose. That's the look at Monday's NHL. Kyle Larson wins in Vegas, Pennzoil 400, and he was 10-1. That's the shortest favorite so far that's won a race this year, because you had Michael McDowell win Daytona, Christopher Bell, the Daytona road course, and then William Byron at 25-1 won at Homestead last week. And then Kyle Larson wins. He beats Brad Keselowski this week. And we're still waiting for the likes of Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott, Kevin Harvick, Joey Logano. None of those guys have won yet. And I said last week, try to find the guy. I know Larson was 10-1. He was about, I think, the fifth or sixth favorite. But almost try to find those guys somewhere in the middle, because the top guys aren't winning yet. They'll win eventually. We saw them win last year. It was Hamlin and Harvick, like, alternating every other race. But now who's going to be that guy that's going to win coming up next week in Phoenix? So that's the look at NASCAR for the week. But we got a lot of college basketball this week. It's going to be very, very busy with all the conference tournaments. And like I said, ACC starts tomorrow. Conference USA starts tomorrow. Then you're going to start getting the Big Ten and the SEC and the Big 12. All of them will begin. And we'll see where the upsets are. We'll see how these teams fare. And at least the good news is we'll have conference tournaments this year, unlike last year, what happened with COVID. So just counting down to Selection Sunday in college basketball. Don't forget to find the Daily Insider every day from 1 to about 1:30 on VegasInsider.com on the YouTube channel. And we have the replay of it on our homepage at VegasInsider.com. So you can find that there in case you missed it. You came in late. You can catch everything on the replay. And we'll be back with you tomorrow to review tonight's action in college basketball. And then, of course, we're counting down to the NBA beginning again on Wednesday night. I'm Kevin Rogers. Thanks again for watching the Daily Insider right here on the YouTube channel on VegasInsider.com. Best of luck with your bets tonight.